Wait, hello everyone. Welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, and today I am joined with a friend. This is T from An Erudite Adventure. T's been on the channel several times. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in a second, T, anyways. Um, but we have a beginning to a series of videos actually this time, as we had the great idea, or I had the great idea, and I dragged T with me because he thought it was great.
Yes.
To read the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. It is very thick. This is a used copy. Look at that spine. Oh my gosh. Um, and we're gonna cover it in 6 parts, right? Because there are 6 books in the Faerie Queene. It's very big, so I didn't want to cover it all at once. And so today we'll talk about book 1. We'll go over some like prefatory material as well. Um, but yes, thanks T for joining me. Anything you want to say
Yeah.
about yourself?
I've, I mean, I would hope that your viewers know who I am by this point, but if not, I also have a booktube channel, as Liam mentioned, called An Erudite Adventure. I talk mostly, at this point, mostly do book reviews where I talk about my thoughts and experience reading various books, pretty much whatever my fancy decides, and lot of fantasy, a lot of historical fiction, quite a bit of sci-fi at this point. Those tend to be the main ones. So if those things sound a lot of Arthurian literature. So if those things sound interesting to you, that's where I would recommend you go if you want to hear, for some reason, my rambling thoughts that maybe aren't as erudite as I'd like them to be.
Well, I think part of the I like about your channel, and I kind of had this concept with my channel when I made it, is that erudite, I guess maybe is a more common word, but Lyceum is Aristotle's school, right? And I didn't use it to imply this is a place you come to learn everything. Actually, I implied it that I am learning stuff and I want to
Right.
share it while I'm doing it, and so
Yeah.
I'm going to, right? Essentially, is the idea. But yeah, go check out T channel if you somehow aren't already subscribed to it. I do have more subscribers than T, and that's not a bit like bragging on him. I just mean that obviously some of my subscribers are not subscribed to T, so um, they should all be subscribed to T. So, um, but yes, I thought this is one thing that should be read. Essentially, I know you wanted to get more into classics in a sense, of bigger, important books. I hadn't read this, and so I was like, yeah, I should read this. So, and hence why you're also here. Um,
Indeed.
so I don't have much to say on Edmund Spenser himself, but I did kind of want us to talk about a little bit about what the Faerie Queene is um, as a work, right? So it was written by Edmund Spenser. It was published in 2 parts as we have it, right? So books 1 through 3 was published in 1590. Books 4 through 6 are published in 1596. Edmund Spenser was born probably in 1552 and died in 1599, right? And this was actually originally to be 12 books, and he didn't finish it, of course, right? So imagine this, but double the length, which is kind of crazy. So, um, and I remember reading somewhere, I think maybe in an introduction to some version, about like the plans of that actually, and how the last one was actually supposed to kind of introduce what the point was in a sense, but he didn't get there, obviously. But Edmund Spenser, he did have a patron, okay, right? It is Queen Elizabeth. It was dedicated to Queen Elizabeth. If you read the dedications, there are 2 dedications in most versions because there's a dedication for the first 3 books and a dedication for the second publications of 4, 5, and 6. But I think it is easy or important to remember, at least for T and I, that Queen Elizabeth was also Queen of Virginia, right? And via the 1609 for land grant, that includes all of Idaho, where I now reside, and all of Alaska, where T resides. So we are honorary Virginians, and Elizabeth is our queen, at least for these videos. So it feels appropriate, at least in that
Yes.
sense. Um, the original books were supposed to cover the 12 virtues. Actually, these are 12 virtues as defined by Aristotle. Actually, speaking of Lyceum, um, and I know they're normally defined by Aristotle as courage, temperance, liberality, magnificence, magnanimity, ambition, patience, friendliness, truthfulness, wittiness, I think, modesty, and justice. Right now, how close he was going to follow that layout, I'm not sure. But I did read again in prefatory material. I don't know if this was included. I know you did the audio,
Yes. Yeah.
um, but that there was a purpose actually that he was in a letter. I can't remember who he wrote it to, but in a letter he wrote what the purpose of the Faerie Queene was. It was to fashion a gentleman or noble person in virtues in gentle discipline. So that was the author's intent with this.
Yeah.
And he also talked about
Valuable
in there.
things.
Yeah, right. I'm fine with that. I'm not a gentle
Yes.
person technically, but Sure, I can learn some virtues.
I mean, if you go back in my family tree far enough, I do end up as Scottish royalty. But
okay, but now you're Virginia, so
right.
um,
Sorry. Yes.
so but she was Queen of Scotland too. They probably didn't like it.
Still my queen then.
They, so anyways, I do think he also mentions the form, which kind of comes in. It's pretty important. It's going to be very obvious actually as soon as you start reading it that it is an allegory, right? These characters generally are something besides just
Yes.
the character on the page, right? And but it's also historical fiction. In fact, Spenser specifically mentions Arthurian stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it reads a lot like an Arthurian romance of the Middle
It
Ages.
does. Yeah.
It's not very strictly Arthurian, mind, but he does definitely compare it with this allegory, historical fiction standpoint. He compares himself to Homer, Virgil, Ariosto, and Tasso. Last two not as popular these days, but actually none of them are as popular these days, relatively speaking. The I'm trying to get through the prefatory stuff. Interrupt me anytime you want to, but the form beyond that is also it's poetry. It is allegory and historical fiction, but it's also poetry. It's not prose. It is also written in what we call a Spenserian stanza, named after Edmund Spenser, which are there are 9 lines. They are 8 lines of iambic pentameter, which are very common. Everyone knows iambic pentameter if you know a look at English. Seems like, and then the last line, one of Alexandrine, an Alexandrine line, which is iambic hexameter. So really close to iambic pentameter. But that scheme is the rhyme scheme is A B A B B C B C C. And I did write down this note from a scholar, Emma Pope, says that Spenser's is a very conscious literary artist. And he uses language kind of in contrast or differently to Shakespeare, which is to say he's very much more conscious is what they're getting at. Whether or not he's better, I'm not sure I care to argue it. But so I will say also that there are politics behind this writing. Of course, his patron was Queen Elizabeth, so that's very obvious that there is going to be there. I do think it's interesting to note, though, at least on this, is that Monmouth, right, he wrote that the Saxons would oppress and rule Britain until the Boar of Cornwall, which is Arthur, would bring relief and restore the Britons. Now, Queen Elizabeth was a member of the Tudors, and the Tudors are Welsh. Okay, and so that is a restoration, at least as far as I'm sure Spenser is leaning into. One of the reasons he almost certainly chose the Arthurian myth. And then beyond that, again, kind of going back with the form, it is this poem is actually known for archaizing. I'm not sure how close to archaizing, like how close that's the right word. To me, like when I read some of this stuff and it's like, okay, yeah, that's a little archaic, I guess, for the time period. But I would think maybe that's like what we would actually call dated, right? It's like he's speaking like from like 100 years before almost, rather than when he actually wrote it, which is to say most people would have understood him. You know, he's just being a little flourishy or whatever, right? No, there goes my child. I'm upset, but he's okay. But I mean, like, there's a couple things, right? Like you have like the word change, for example, has a U in it after the A. Now, remember though, the English is not standardized at this point, anyways. And then you also have like something like you'd have like a word. I'm going to go over words as they actually come up through the cantos for book 1. But you have like a word, for example, like ne, 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 which does not survive in modern English. It's not nay as in no. Nay literally means a not, right? And not means not as in N-O-U-G-H-T, which means nothing, right? And so nay is actually our original word for not. You see it all the time in like Old English. But he also has other things. You have like plurals are used in a funny way, like eyes is iron often. He does use eyes though as well. So he just uses whatever he wants. Right. Which again, I don't think that doesn't, to me, at least for the time period, doesn't feel archaic. That feels just dated. Right. At that point, everyone realizes eyes is what we call eyes, but iron, I think everyone would have understood that, maybe depending on the dialect, right? He also does use some infinitives, like with the en endings, right? So he says like to viewin, I think at one point, right? And for example, like Chaucer uses these infinitives, but Shakespeare doesn't use them at all. Right. And then the other big one, I guess, is the past participle. He uses the prefix of I or Y, right? Which really only survives in eclept, like as obvious, at least in English. Enough and alike and aware, actually, that A and the E, I guess, in the case of enough, are actually the same prefix, just modified and kind of uh, reassociated with other things. But this prefix comes from Old English "ya," the GE in Old English, which was actually largely optional by Chaucer's time, and it was actually kind of redundant in Old English, even if you know your Old English. So it's just kind of there because essentially it's just an ed ending, right? It just means it already happened, right? It's a past participle. So, anyways, sorry, that's the. I'll take a breath.
It's
Do you got
good.
anything
No,
to say?
that's lots of good information. Lots of good place to center ourselves before we dive into what the story actually contains. Because I think that historical context will help us to further dissect, I guess, and understand a little bit more of what he's meaning as he goes through these things. And um, knowing that in a lot of ways this is an allegory is an important aspect as well, because the more you go through it, and it's very blatant, it's and at times more blatant than Narnia. Um, and so yes, knowing that it's an allegory can be very helpful as well in the explaining and expectations of what you're going to get from this story.
I think it'll become obvious very, or at least for me, it was obvious very early on. And I was telling you this that he's very preachy and he has very much
Hmm.
his own opinions about what
Yes,
he is talking about, and
right,
it's kind of funny. It's kind of offensive to certain groups. We'll talk about that. But you can definitely tell. Again, this goes back to the politics side of things that he was writing this pertaining to his times, right? Like
yes,
about the political issues of his day. Um, which makes sense. I wouldn't expect really
right.
otherwise. Raph would be happy with us. Anyways, um, hi Raph, if you're watching. Anyways, but we can get into book one if you want.
Yeah.
And I will say actually before we really, I think at some point I'll probably read an excerpt or two
Hmm.
from it. This video is going to be super long. I feel like. Anyway, no, we'll see. But that I didn't find the poetry actually be that difficult.
No,
I think it's
the
pretty
poetry
easy to understand most part.
the poetry side of things, I had no issue with. It was primarily the archaisms, which weren't even archaic. It's the old style that I am not used to reading just because I haven't done it enough. And when I'm listening to audiobooks, which is what I did for this one, LibriVox has a free version with a good narrator. I actually like the narrator; he does a good job. But with an older style like this, I tend to my ears, I'll say it that way to make it sound like it's less me, because I am genuinely interested in the story and what's going on,
Uh-huh.
but my brain just hears it as noise, and so it shuts it off in order to focus on the other thing that I'm doing, which
Mhm.
if I'm sitting at my desk at work, it's doing work. If I'm mowing the lawn or whatever, which is what I did for a lot of this, I can not focus on mowing because as long as I'm going in a straight line, I don't care.
Right.
Pretty much, and that way I'm able to focus a lot better. And so that's what I had to do. I'm sure that this will get mentioned at some point again, but I listened to this first book. I believe it's right. It's book, and the canto is a
Yeah.
small section.
Yeah.
So I listened to this first book 3 times because the first time I listened to it and don't think I understood a single word. That's an exaggeration, obviously, but I really didn't get anything out of it. The second time, before I listened to it, the second time I went and read a breakdown of each of the individual cantos, and then listened to it, and I got a little bit more out of it, and then I went through and listened to it a third time and got even more out of it that third time. So with repetition, I was able to pick up some things and build onto my understanding from previous lessons and stuff like that. So
Yeah. And which is fair. Honestly, I thought you were kind of brave. I know you mostly listen to things, but like,
just due to time primarily and
yeah,
availability.
right. And that's fair. I like listening to audiobooks too. But I say it was relatively easy, but I also knew that I was like, I don't want to listen to this. I want to read this. And I think that helped me. I think maybe
Yeah.
ideally I would have read it out loud. I would have recited it. And I
Yeah.
didn't, right? I read it in my head. But I do think it's rather beautiful at times. And I think the story is definitely fun.
Hmm.
Actually, that was one thing I think I forgot to mention in the little intro. part is that it actually, besides just spelling and certain other archaisms, is that it actually imitates a medieval manuscript in style, which is to say, you won't really see it so much today because we're just going to be talking about book one, but that each story is separate, right? And so if you read like a medieval manuscript, like they're more like compendiums often, right? And a lot of them have, like they'll have charms and they'll have homilies and then they'll have stories or like romances or whatever. But I mean, even things that have like just several romances or whatever. So, for example, I'm thinking like the Lincoln Thornton manuscript or the Auchinleck manuscript, right? Which is to say, it's one big book, like physically, but there's several stories in it, and that's kind of how this works. Except for they're just more thematically connected. But in some sense, that is pretty closely coming from that medieval tradition, which was pretty recently over at this point, right? The printing press is relatively new at this point. So anyways, let's get to book one, which is The Legend of the Knight of the Red Cross. And remember that each one of these books focuses on a virtue. I could reveal it at the end, but let's just talk about it now. The virtue here is holiness, which is the name of the Knight of the Red Cross, actually, is holiness. He gets another name at the end, which, if you know anything about Knights of Red Crosses, you actually know who it is from the beginning. But he gets like an actual name in that sense. But
Yes.
he is holiness, right? And he has some troubles he goes through. But
Right.
So we actually have the first thing we have before Canto 1 starts is it's like a prelude. That's actually called a proem, and which is poem but with an R after the P. Anyways, and so that's what it's called. Anyways, and it does very normal things. Okay, so it invokes the muses. In fact, I think it specifically invokes Clio, which is the muse of history, for those unaware. What's interesting is that he does not invoke Calliope, who is the muse of epic poetry and the chief muse normally. But remember, though, that he says this is historical fiction, right? So his topic is history. It makes sense to invoke Clio. And it does definitely, it kind of takes it, the theme with this proam is that he's taking these stories from a pastoral setting to like an epic, right? He's making an epic, an English epic, really.
Yeah.
And yeah. But he kind of mentions also, like he mentions Tanaquil, doesn't explain who Tanaquil is. That's the Faerie Queene, by the way. It's also the name she doesn't go by like ever again in book one. But but that's the Faerie Queene is Tanaquil, right? But at the same time, Queen Elizabeth is actually kind of compared, right, and associated with Tanaquil, right? In fact, this is Queen Elizabeth on the cover of the Faerie Queene, and because and then Queen Elizabeth is compared, right? She's called a goddess, right? So she's heavenly bright. She is a mirror of grace, right? Like majesty, divine majesty. Majesty being like kind of this thing that is only associated with royalty, anyways. You don't really think about that in a modern sense normally, right? But these monarchs had like coronation ceremonies that were very religious, and so yeah, just she's the greatest, we gotta invoke that. So anyways, sorry, I have more, but they're language themes mostly, so sorry.
Well, no, you're good. I just as we prepare to go into Canto 1, the audiobook that I was listening to titles it Front Matter. And so it's just the information at the front that explains what you're going to get. A preface or an introduction or any of those types of things would be in modern literature. The things that I noticed, and maybe your book is different than the one that I was reading or listening to, I don't know, but the things that I noticed, besides the fact that he is making sure that you know why he's writing it and who he's writing it for, the fact that they will hear and understand, he also, in it, is contained basically little letters to a whole bunch of people that he has problems with.
Yeah,
and those are they're fun to read,
and they're written as
listen to,
or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I didn't write any notes about those because goodness gracious. But yeah, I forgot about
there's
those,
a lot
actually.
in them.
Thanks
There's a lot
reminding
in there as well.
There are several.
But no, there's that part which is good. But he also and I don't know if this is Spenser or if this is somebody else explaining what Spenser was intending to do with it. But in that front matter, he also mentions that the final book, the book 12, was supposed to be a the start of all these events. So
Yeah.
each of these books, you go into book one and you're in the middle of the adventure already. Whereas, and then you go into book two and you're in the middle of a different adventure already. And then book 12 was supposed to come wrap it all up and show how those adventures began, much in the same way as like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight does, where at Feast of Christmas, I forget which feast it is, and
Yeah.
Sir Gawain and Green Knight, but the Arthur holds court, and before he can feast, an adventure has to happen. This is a very common thing. Arthur does this all the time. You see it in what's the super famous Mallory, Le Morte d'Arthur. You see it a lot of times, which is where one of my first notes with this first book comes in. This first section reminds me a lot of the Gareth, I believe, Sir Gareth story, which I believe he goes by. I can't remember the. Oh, that's a problem. I can't remember what the nickname that Sir Kay gives Gareth in this section. Like I can't remember, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not gonna try. But it reminds me of that section where the princess comes in and requests a night, and obviously events happen differently. But the princess comes in and requests a night, and he volunteers, and then goes off with the knight with the lady to do whatever these things are that she requires him to do. And so there's a lot of that I am reminded of immediately off the bat with this one. But before we get into that first book, I want to go back to how it's being set up. As we're going to, if Spenser writes book 12, this is what book 12 is going to be, and it's going to be set in front, timeline wise, set earlier than the events of the rest of these things, and going to explain how all these things came to begin.
Right. Yeah, and I thought that was very interesting. I'm sad we don't get the whole Faerie Queene, unfortunately, but it is nice to know, and that kind of then everything is tied together by this royal feast, which, like you said, is very, very common, especially tying it to Arthurian, right? Which does come up later in the cantos. We'll talk about that. But it's Beaumains, right? Isn't that
Thank
the
you.
nickname?
Yes.
Beautiful hands.
Yes. Yep.
So, anyways, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of front stuff. Just a note, real quick, on some language stuff. I'll probably do this wherever it pops up.
Excellent.
Let me double check, because I kind of want to just read it if I can. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing actually is scrine. It's like the first word that shows up, and it's like, what the heck is a scrine? That's a chest or a box. Anyways, and then imp also is not a negative connotation. There's no negative connotation with it here. It just means like kind of offspring, right? And so in this sense, the imp mentioned is Venus. This is imp, right, which is Cupid, right? So, and then also dread, which is a very common title for kings and queens at the time, right? Which just means highly revered. Doesn't mean like, oh no, I'm super afraid, right? It does kind of mean that anyways, right? But it's actually very similar to the word fear, right? In like a King James Version sense of the Bible, fear means to be like to venerate or stand in awe of, right? It doesn't quite mean what, I mean, it's close in a sense. You can see the semantic drift there, but the biggest thing I wanted to note about the language here, which probably is the smallest thing to everyone listening, is the word tongue. Okay, in just the second stanza, I'm going to read the last like 4 lines of this. It says, "Whom that most noble Briton prince so long." Also, by the way, G's at the end of these words started falling out right around the time these were published, so it might have been long. I'm not sure. Mine, the G's fell out in London first, but he was writing in London, so it might have been long. I don't know. We'll say long, because why not? Anyways, "Whom that most noble Briton prince so long sought through the world and suffered so much ill, that I must rue his undeserved wrong. Oh, help thou my weak wit and sharpen my dull tongue." It's tongue, right? But it actually does rhyme with the wrong one here. So that's a slightly later change. Anyways, that's my poem notes. We can get to Canto 1 now, where we get to the actual story in a sense, right? So the invocation and everything is done with. We're going to get to the actual story, and so that is where we're introduced to a knight, right? And he's coming from this court, of Tanaquil, who is actually called Gloriana here, and that's the name we're going to get for the Faerie Queene most of the time is Gloriana. And we have this Knight of the Red Cross who is Holiness, right? Let's see. I'm going to read the first two stanzas of this, actually, because this is his introduction. First two stanzas of Canto 1. A gentle knight was pricking on the plain, clad in mighty arms and silver shield, wherein old dints of deep wounds did remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field. Yet arms till that time that he never wield, his angry steed did chide his foaming bit, as much disdaining to the curb to yield. Full jolly knight he seemed, and fair did sit, as one for knightly joust in fierce encounters fit. But on his breast a bloody cross he bore, the dear remembrance of his dying lord, for whose sweet sake that glorious badge he wore, and dead as living ever him adored. Upon his shield the like was also scored, for sovereign hope, which in his help he had, right faithful true he was indeed in word. But of his cheer did some to solemn sad, yet nothing did he dread, but ever was a dread. So I will say also that you listen to it, but most versions of this have the original spelling, which is confusing. Note that in early modern English, V and U are changed often. V at the beginning of a word, honestly, normally U anywhere else. So you're going to have to figure that out. Also, this guy doesn't use J's for the life of him. He uses G's normally, which is interesting because if you read like the King James Version of the Bible, it almost just uses an I, which a J is just a long I anyways. He uses G's. So like joust is Giusts, which is a really funky way to spell joust as far as modern readers are concerned. But anyways, we have this knight. He's obviously a Christian knight, right? He has a cross, Knight of the Red Cross, and very, very English figure, to be completely honest. And it's nice. I like his intro. Anyways, after that, we get introduced to the other characters. Actually, I think this opening is really cool because it feels almost like a short story. And so we are introduced to his companion, who's this woman. She's not given any name, I don't think, in Canto 1. We also have a dwarf. I'm not sure he's ever named, ever. So maybe he is pretty late. So I can't remember, at least right now. But he's traveling with these people. The dwarf is technically the companion of the woman, if I remember correctly. But they're traveling together. Essentially, the knight is on a quest, right? Actually, he's on a quest for this woman. I can't remember if this is all revealed at the beginning.
It is. It's some of it is in the front matter, that first section, and some of it is in this first canto, and I don't remember how much of which is which. It doesn't matter though, because by this point you'll hopefully have read the stuff at the beginning.
Yeah. So essentially, I'll just put it here, whether or not it comes up later again, that he's on the quest for Gloriana, the queen, but he's also specifically on a quest for Una, who is the woman with him who doesn't have the name right now. Her parents are captive of a dragon. The goal is to go and slay a dragon. Okay. And
right there.
Yeah.
Another one.
So yes. But as far as like the story opening actually is concerned, the first thing that happens is rain. There's rain. And so they need to seek shelter. Right. But they end up wandering in a wood, right? They're wandering in the woods and they find the Den of Error. Remember, this is an allegory, so it's literally error, capital E, error, right? This is Error's Den, which is a woman here. Do you remember how Error is described? It is very, very vivid. This is actually probably one of the most vivid descriptions of any of the characters.
I'm possibly confusing it with the description of Duessa from later, so I'm going to refrain.
That's fine. So she's a demon woman, essentially, right? She has I think it was an Old Moon story, and it might have been even in the volume we're reading now, the Arthurian one, that has a demon definitely inspired by Error from this, right? Because she has many dugs, is how he puts it, which means she's got many teats, right? To feed her spawn, right? She vomits books and papers, okay, and toads and frogs that have no eyes. Okay, so the stuff with her vomiting, this is political messaging like right out the start actually. So the books and papers are definitely like false teachings. They're religious pamphlets. Is literally just what they are, right? And then the toads is like spiritual blindness essentially, right? Because it's they're toads that don't have eyes, and kind of like ugliness too, right? Because toads are obviously not associated with good things. So
Right.
and then Error herself is pretty straightforward. Her name is Error. So I mean, like, but this is like more strictly speaking, it's like it's kind of like confusion and confusion in sin, right? Essentially, is
Right.
what Error is representing. So they wander into her lair, essentially.
Mm.
So um, you have this cool fight. Holiness kills Error, essentially, right? He beheads her, and then her spawn drink her blood.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that is a rather graphic scene, actually. The
yes,
way that happens. Yeah.
yeah, it's altogether a bit much, to be honest. Which I think is interesting because I mean you do have stuff like this in medieval romances. They're pretty graphic, pretty martial, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in here that we're actually kind of getting an intro to ideas, right? And also you have the idea of like holiness, almost kind of like confused, right? The deception thing is going to come on more as the cantos go on, but um, one of the first deceptions actually though is not so much Error. Error is very obviously bad in this case, right? But right after they meet Error, they meet a black weeded man, which means he's dressed in black, right? And he has a book at his belt. I will say the normal medieval imagery here, and this is not he's subverting it, but the normal medieval he lives in a hidden cell. Okay, that's what it said, right? Bidding his beads. Okay, which means he prays on beads. And a book like the book would probably be like a Psalter or something like that, or the Constellation of Philosophy is a very common belt book to have, right? Or a book of common prayer or something like that, right? Um, and dressed in black implies that he's Benedictine monk, right? Now, that's the obvious image to anyone who would recognize that, right, at the time. Um, but this isn't a real hermit, or maybe it is, and all hermits are just evil. Because this is Archimago, who is an evil sorcerer. Um, and the book is not a psalter. Actually, it is a book of black magic, right? And he is, I don't know. So this is what I meant like earlier, where he very much has his ideas. He's very anti-Catholic,
Yeah.
which makes sense, right? I mean, the Protestant Reformation in England is relatively recent, all things considered, right? You think about how, I mean, Mary's, not Mary, sorry. Well, yeah, Mary, maybe, but Elizabeth's rise to power, and like her family history, like recent family history and stuff, right? So this is the point where it's not actually solid, though, that they're going to have a Protestant country, really, not just royalty. But and so Spenser very early on makes it very obvious that he is batting for the Protestants because he's batting for
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, who is a Protestant, right? So, what do you think of that? Do you think it was like super overt? I thought it was.
Uh, it's very obvious that it's religious or political religious messaging. That much is very clear. I didn't make all the connections as to who Archimago or Archimago or however you want to pronounce it is until I went through and read basically Spark Notes, trying to figure out who he was. Not I wasn't specifically searching for who he was,
Uh-huh.
but um, just trying to understand the story as a whole. And then I see it, and going back through the second and third time, I was like, okay, I absolutely, this fits
Yeah,
perfectly with what they're going with, what he's going for here. So
yeah, I think he's an interesting villain. He's one of the main ones, though I would say he's not quite the main one. I will say that actually that our villains have an interesting end for at the end of book one, but we'll talk about
mhm.
that later, I'm sure. But in a sense, I think I can't remember if he's mentioned directly as such, but he is definitely playing the character of deceit, right? Like if that is like besides his name of Archimago, like he is deceit, right? Um, and so he's going to rear his head a lot, actually. Um, essentially how this canto ends actually is Archimago's like he's playing friendly, right? And the revelation comes that he actually takes some sprites to deceive, right? And so he makes a sprite to look like Una, right? And Una means like singular, right? So she is the allegory she represents is truth, right? She is truth essentially, right? And this sprite who looks like Una wants a kiss, right? And um, and I think there's another sprite that gives Holiness or the Red Cross Knight, right, an unchaste dream, right? This doesn't work though, actually.
Right.
And the young knight returns to sleep. That's how the Canto 1 ends. Canto 2 is going to continue this, but that's how Canto 1 ends. Is it doesn't work on him.
Right. Just a note on Una. The name literally means one.
Yeah.
So.
And her counterpart is Duessa, which is going to come up in a second. But,
which means two.
Yeah. So yeah.
Right, he's not very subtle with his naming conventions.
Right.
It's very
and
obvious
it is
what he's trying to do.
Yeah,
yes.
It is allegory, and it is very unapologetic allegory. I mean, that's the thing with like Lewis, who is much more restricted or restrained, even you could say, right? I mean, like this is allegory, like more like Constellation of Philosophy or Piers Plowman, right? It is very obviously allegory.
Or Pilgrim's Progress, or
yeah, that is the intended like thought here. Is that like, oh, that's very on nose because that's the point, right? Like you're supposed to know it from the beginning.
Right.
So, anyways, that's my plot thoughts on Canto 1. I have some language thoughts again, which we can just always go over at the end of the discussion. But do you have any other thoughts on Canto 1?
I mean, mostly just it sets you into the story immediately, very quickly, very obviously. Like we mentioned, the fight with Error, and then the immediate introduction to Archimago. Those two things are, first off, you see that you're setting up by you already know that this is a dragon slaying story, but then you fight a monster and you slay the monster, and you're setting up for how the rest of the story is going to, essentially how it's going to end. That's not really a spoiler. That's what you're getting from this type of story. So you're facing a foe and it's going to be defeated, but then you're also dealing with Archimago, or the Antichrist. The Catholic Church is how it's being portrayed, essentially.
Yeah. So if you're Catholic, you might find this very offensive, to be completely honest. Which is fair. Actually, it is kind of offensive. I feel like.
Yeah, sure.
Right. I mean, like I'm not Catholic, right? But like reading, I was like, wow, this is pretty harsh. So, like,
it's definitely a harsh critique, and
very heated politics at the time. So I mean, again, it's not surprising. So yeah, there's a lot that happens. I'm kind of surprised. Like we have Error. Actually, it's very sword and sorcery in a lot of ways. Besides the fact that it's allegory, which sword and sorcery is not normally allegory, right? It's got this cool fight against this monster called Error in the sense, and then there's this sorcerer, right, who's bad, obviously, in a sense. But I liked it. I like the first canto. It definitely gives you a good intro to the story.
Yes.
Should I share language thoughts, or do you?
Absolutely.
Okay, these are just random as I was reading them, right? So, one thing, the first thing actually was "for wasted." The word "for wasted" means wasted, but really bad, and so like it's an intensifier. For is an intensifier. See this a lot in Old English. So it is really badly wasted, which means it's completely wasted. That's right. We have the word Lehman's, which I only mentioned because I think Lehman's. This is the genitive, right? So we put like Lehman apostrophe S is how you write this modern English. I will say that Spenser doesn't. So if you're reading this physically, there is no apostrophe S, but it's still the genitive, right? Which is say the ownership conjugation, right? And we also have the word eftsoons, which pops up a good amount throughout the whole thing.
It certainly does.
So eftsoons essentially means like immediately. It can kind of mean a few different things depending on the context, but yeah. I mean,
very
like,
soon, immediately. That's generally the way that it was used as.
Right. Essentially, it means immediately, or like once again. It can mean like another time, or soon after, or presently, like it's happening right now. Essentially, eftsoons actually comes from two words. Obviously, it's a compound. Eft is one we don't really use anymore. It is actually the first part of after. Eft in Old English is actually spelled, I think, the same way, eft. But that actually means afterwards. Like, or pertaining to something like backwards, right? Like a return or whatever. And then soons, which is soon. I will say actually that historically soon actually means immediately. It doesn't mean soon. So,
Right.
interesting. But so
There's an interesting note that's kind of contradictory to that when you're looking at Spanish, and it depends on the location that you're speaking Spanish at. But pronto, yeah, let's see, is that the one that I'm thinking of? No, ahora means now, as in now.
okay.
However, depending on how you're using it and where you're using it and who you're using it with, it might mean sometime,
No.
or it might mean right now, or it might mean in a few minutes. Totally depends on the context of how it's being used, and that's very confusing. I do not like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think T and I, we were actually recently writing a story and editing it, and I think we kind of figured out that time things, the words for time, are very subject to change. It seems like, so,
Yeah.
or being rather confusing even at right now, I guess. So, or sometime. No, but so, anyways, that's all my thoughts essentially for
Good thoughts.
Canto 1. So we can get to Canto 2.
Yes.
Let me open it up real quick to see if there's anything at the start of this one to read, but yeah. So actually, this one actually opens setting up kind of time. Again, actually speaking of time, and that is it talks about constellations, and I just think it's nicely done. So I want to read the first stanza. So by this the northern wagoner had set his sevenfold team behind the steadfast star, that was in ocean waves yet never wet, but firm is fixed and sendeth light from far to all that in the wide deep wandering are. And cheerful Chanticleer with his note shrill had warned once that Phoebus fiery care, I think car, no, his fiery car, his chariot, hey, sorry, and Hast, Hast, I guess, haste, I don't know, was climbing up the eastern hill, full envious that night so long his room did fill. Talking about the sky, I think DJ Butler would be happy. I mean, you have things like the Wain, which is a Boetus, right, or the sevenfold team being the Big Dipper or Ursa Major, I guess. North Star as well.
Well, I mean, because it calls it, what does it call him? Something. It's right before he says the steadfast star. There, that phrase there. I don't want to say it wrong.
Put it down.
I'm gonna make you open it back up again. But it's very obvious. Basically, another word or name for that constellation that's known as Big Dipper or the Ursa Major is the plow. People call it the plow.
The plow is more of the common in Celtic themes, I think.
But it's part of that, and so using that language is it's very obvious who you're talking, what constellations you're talking about.
Constellations have several ways to interpret them because they're just dots. Anyways, so like
connect them however you want.
And some of them are very obvious. I always thought like something like some of them are like super good. Like Cygnus, I think, is great, and Cassiopeia and stuff like that. But
I mean, the Big Dipper makes sense
Gemini's
to me.
Great, Orion's great. But something like Pegasus, just a freaking square. Lame. Anyways, so I suggest you learn.
They're very imaginative.
So
they're very imaginative.
Yeah, well, they're very interesting. It's nice when you can see them. You could probably see them better than I can. But
sometimes it's usually when we can see them, it's 40 below, and so we don't see them because we don't want to spend the time outside.
Anyways,
I have spent the time. I have gone and laid out in the snow and watched them.
That's the Northern Virginian talking right there.
Yes.
So I'm not as far north Virginian anyways. I'm still relatively kind of northern. But okay. The first like plot point though I actually have for this is that the sprites we have essentially just a continuation of Canto 1, right? So the sprites remember, one gives a dream before, the other one looks like Una. Now they're like, okay, we got to change up our tactic. So one of them becomes a young squire, and one of them becomes Una, or I guess probably stays the same as Una. And then they go to bed together, essentially, right? And this is actually what works in a sense, right? Holiness is disgusted, essentially, and he runs away from Una, right? Who is just sleeping and doesn't know what's going on. But I will say also that in this, and maybe it comes up more in Canto 1, but there are and you even saw that actually in that intro that I just read. There are a ton of classical references in this, a ton of classical references, like all over the time, right? We have like Hesperus, who's the son of Eos, right? He's the evening star, actually, which is why he's mentioned again with descriptions of the sky, right? Proserpina, who's just the Roman version of Persephone, right? You have Tithonus, who's the lover of Eos, Prince of Troy, right? Type of thing. Right. Actually mentioned he was granted immortality, but not eternal youth. That is the unfortunate part of his story. So, anyways, Holiness flees, right? And then Una wakes up after this. Okay. And I can't remember if we actually get much. I don't think we get much of Una in Canto 2. I think we kind of switch on and off after a while for a while. So essentially, Holiness, he flees and then he meets a Saracen. Okay. And the Saracen, who's sans foi, which means faithless, by the way, in French.
That sans means without.
Right, without. We still say it in English, sometimes, I guess. And sans foi has a maiden, seemingly, with him who goes by the name of Fidessa, right? Who is described as a royal princess, right? Fidessa would imply that she's faithful, right?
Fidelity.
That's not her real name, though. She's not faithful. She's actually, I would say, the main villain, personally, in book 1.
At least in terms of like appearance, amount of time on page, and stuff like that.
She's there the most, for sure. So I'll just say it right now. I think it does. I can't remember if it comes up right. Okay, but she is Duessa. She's who we mentioned before, right? She's got this dual thing going on, I guess. So yeah. Anyways, so he meets the Saracen. Of course, you find a Saracen with a maid in the forest, and you fight the Saracen, right? And so he of course, so that's just the only thing to do. And so he beats sans foi, right? What's interesting, actually, I think is after this, right, is that he plucks a bough from a tree, which then bleeds and cries out, right? And this is where we get like the story. This is actually, this is where we learn that Duessa is Duessa, I think, because we actually learn about her, right? Because this tree is a guy named Ferdubio, and so who was cursed by Duessa, right? And his love is another tree, Felissa, right? And so we learned that they got cursed by Duessa, blah blah blah, right? Because this guy saw like who Duessa actually was, and can't have that. So they're like doomed lovers, essentially.
Is this where we get when we get the description of Duessa? And or is, I feel like, because I know it's earlier on, I don't know if it's in this canto or not, but at some point there's a description of Duessa. Well, she gets described several times in different manners, but one of them that's particularly, again, graphic, and you're just like, what is going on here? So anyways,
I can't remember where she's described exactly, but I definitely know she is a little later for sure, but I can't remember the first time. But let me see, where am I in my notes? That's pretty much what happens. So most of this canto is fighting the Saracen real quick, learning the story of these two trees, okay, which is great. Poor guy lost a limb. Anyways, and then Duessa faints, right? Mostly as a tactic as a feint. So so that Holiness doesn't figure out that these two trees are talking about her, essentially, right? So she faints, also kind of to prevent them from being helped in a sense, right? Doesn't want her, again, her duplicity, Duessa, her an identity to be discovered. That's the end of the canto. It's pretty straightforward. Any thoughts before I get into the language ones? Sorry.
I mean, I'm kind of interjecting them as we go at this point. What cue I have.
Great. That's how it should be. Okay. Language thoughts real quick. Bootless, which also pops up a good amount in this. Bootless means like profitless, unavailing, fruitless. Boot can kind of mean like boon or gift type of thing, right? So if you're bootless and not doing very hot, I guess. That pops up here. White also pops up, which is not just an undead D&D creature or whatever. White just means living creature, actually. So like if you read like Middle English poetry, white normally just means a person. Normally. So and then we have Trean, which very straightforwardly just means wooden, right? It's made of tree. And you have one instance here where cheer is like very obviously like when someone says be of good cheer, what are they saying? They're literally saying have a happy face. That's literally what that means,
Yeah.
right? Cheer just means face, or kind of countenance, right? And then hue actually kind of means the same thing. So hue means color, kind of in modern English, but it archaically has more of the meaning of like form or appearance. Um,
Mm.
and then let's see, what's the other word? Oh, unwheaten, which is just funky looking, but it means unwittingly. Um, so, anyways, those are the language notes I had for Canto 2.
Good. Good.
Okay, Canto 3. I will say, actually, I put a note in here for some reason only on Canto 3. I don't know why I didn't put it earlier. But that canto, it means song, essentially.
Yep.
Right. And this one, in this particular case, it's coming from Italian. I don't know what the Spanish word for it is. It might be the exact same.
Canto.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. But in this case,
Or
it's coming from Italian.
cancion.
Okay.
Cancion is actually generally what's used.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're coming from Italian influence, remember that he cited like Ariosto and Tasso earlier, right? So Italian Renaissance stuff is pretty popular at this point. Um, the native English word for a canto is fit. Okay. Um, great word. Anyways, they're both fine. I don't have a problem with canto, obviously. So, anyways, Canto 3. I didn't really have a note to read the beginning of this one like we did for the first two cantos, but um, in this one, we go back to Una. Okay, so Una is searching for the Red Cross Knight. Actually, no, that's not true. I do have something to read because this is one you see in artwork actually quite a bit. I'm not sure what artwork we'll put for the thumbnail of this video, but it might have something to do with this because there's just so many good ones. I think I sent you one actually. I think I might use that.
I think you did send me. I'd have
I have to go back to our chat, which was too long ago, probably. I'll find it. But
maybe not. We haven't talked that much recently.
That's true.
I mean, we have, but
so
yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to read this whole page, but this is about Una meeting a lion, which is really cool. This is. I mentioned the art here because I've seen several artworks of Una and the lion. It's just a very popular piece to make into art, I guess. So this is stanzas 4 through 8. One day, nigh weary of the irksome way, from her unhasty beast she did alight. Let's talk about her horse, right? And on the grass her dainty limbs did lay. And maybe it was a donkey. I don't know. Her steed. Anyways, in secret shadow, far from all men's sight, from her fair head, her fillet, I don't know, she undight, and laid her stole aside her angel's face, as the great eye of heaven shined bright, and made a sunshine in the shady place. Did never mortal eye behold such heavenly grace? Beautiful. Anyways. And fortuned out of the thickest wood, a ramping lion rushed suddenly, hunting full greedy after salvage blood. That's another actual thing. It's savage. We don't put the L in there almost ever now. Salvage blood. Soon as the royal virgin he did spy, with gaping mouth at her ran greedily, to have at once devoured her tender corse. But to the prey, when as he drew more nigh, his bloody rage assuaged with remorse, and with the sight amazed forgat his furious force. Instead thereof, he kissed her weary feet, and licked her lily hands with fawning tongue, I guess. And as he were wronged innocence did weet. Oh, how can beauty master the most strong, and simple truth subdue avenging wrong, whose yielded pride and proud submission still dreading death, when she had marked long, her heart gone melt in great compassion, and drizzling tears did shed for pure affection. The lion lord of every beast and field, quoth she, his princely puissance doth abate, and mighty proud to humble weak does yield, forgetful of the hungry rage which late him pricked in pity of my sad estate. But he, my lion and my noble lord, how does he find in cruel heart to hate her that him loved and ever most adored? As the god of my life, why hath he me abhorred? Redounding tears did choke the end of her plaint, which softly echoed from the neighbor wood. And sad to her sorrowful constraint, the kingly beast upon her gazing stood, with pity calmed. Down fell his angry mood. At last in close heart shutting up her pain, rose the virgin born of heavenly brood, and to her snowy palfrey got again, to seek her strayed champion, if she might attain. Anyways, so she gets a lion as a pet. Is essentially what happened. But how to say this? Okay, so after this happens, actually, she gets this lion. Right? She then meets a damsel, right, carrying water, right? We learn this damsel's name is Abessa, and she is deaf and dumb. So I believe that Una calls out to her and she doesn't respond, which probably has something to do with the fact that she's deaf. So, but then, so Abessa returns to her home. Again, this is actually more anti-Catholic stuff, just heads up. Where her mother, who is Corkeka, I think. What is that? What I wrote?
Close enough.
Anyways, Corsica. I have no clue. Anyways, who is blind, right? So the daughter's deaf and dumb. The mother is blind. And the mother is said to recite 900 paternosters and triple aves every day, right? Which is to say she's just praying nonstop, right? So Una asks for a place to rest, and the lion pretty much breaks in the door. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's more like star knowledge here, as Aldebaran is mentioned, right? The Eye of Taurus, high above Cassiopeia. Anyways, constellations matter, I guess. And then a church robber comes at night to give the spoils that he robs from churches, of course, to the mother and daughter, and he is rent to pieces by the lion, right? Corsica or Corsica, whatever. Then here, okay, so essentially we have these three characters who again are allegorical characters hating on the Catholic Church, right? So we have Corsica, who is blindly praying, right? She's got a blind heart. She doesn't think about this stuff. She's just taught to pray, and she does, right? And it seemingly avails her nothing, right? Then you have Abesa, who is, the name means absence more strictly, but it also looks like abbess, right? And what is she doing? She actually fornicates with the church stealer, right? So this is, again, this is kind of harsh, right? But it's very much, do nuns all fornicate? No, right? But it is implying that they did, right? In a sense. And some of them I'm sure do. Obviously, they're humans, right? So Kirk Rapine is actually the church thief's name, and that just means church thief.
Literally.
So essentially his problem then is he is hoarding, rather churches kind of hoard and steal from citizens, right? But Kirkapine is bad here, in a sense, because he is stealing for this nun-like character, right? Essentially, right? So that nuns and monks, not only do they fornicate, but they also kind of have this false worship going on and idolatry, essentially, right? Essentially, this is like a justification of the dissolution of the monasteries and prosecuting Catholics. Which I think some of that stuff is terrible. The dissolution of the monasteries is one of the worst historical events in my opinion, like terrible. And that was a Protestant thing, but I don't know. It's just very, very on the nose. Like look how bad these stinking Catholics are, man. So, what did you think of that?
There's not a whole lot that sticks in my mind from this canto, to be honest. I remember the lion. I know that he tears somebody apart, but really quickly, as we're going back through this, there is a character, a person, I'll say it that way rather, in the Bible, who's referred to as the lion. And that's of course Jesus.
Yeah.
And so Jesus is literally tearing apart the people who are corrupting the church.
Yeah, and that one in some ways doesn't feel like the strictest allegory, but it kind of does.
No,
right?
it's not necessarily the strictest allegory, but there's gonna be times throughout here where they're not so obvious, but
yeah,
at the same time, it could, that application or that observation
right.
could be made.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely a good one. In fact, I had that thought when I was reading those stanzas. So thank you. That's not actually quite the end of the canto.
No, it's not.
That pretty much happens, right? That bad stuff with those three people happens,
right.
And then she meets Archimago.
Sorry, one other note. It when she first meets the lion, it talks about how the lion kisses her, which would be like a lick, like the dogs do. If you've ever seen the picture, an image of a lion's tongue, it would not be pleasant to be kissed by a lion. They're designed to tear the meat off the bone with their tongue. I
don't know if you knew this, but you're right. It's cute though. The imagery is cute.
Yes.
So,
which it's very possible that Spenser didn't know what a lion tongue was like.
I mean, it's not quite the Middle Ages, so maybe he'd seen a lion. I don't know. I can't imagine being licked by one. So, right. But I don't know. to be honest. I'm not sure on any menageries in London at the time. So anyways, she then meets Archimago after this encounter. Archimago is disguised. All right, he's disguised actually as the Red Cross Knight, and they start to travel together. Um, and then they meet another Saracen, Sansloy, who I think is, what is this? Lawless, I think Loy is.
That would make sense without law. Yep.
So Sansloy attacks Archimago, who he thinks is the Red Cross Knight.
We should mention these Saracens that we're meeting are siblings. They're brothers.
Yeah, so we're going to meet another one, and they're all three brothers. Yes. So yeah, he wants vengeance for Sans Foy, so he attacks Archimago, who again he thinks is Red Cross Knight because that's what he's disguised as. He deals a blow actually to Archimago before recognizing him, actually even in his disguise. So then he decides that this is no enemy, and so he stabs the lion, I think, instead, right? So, yeah. And then he takes Una captive. That's pretty much this one. So.
Yeah. Sad end for the lion. Best character. So
yeah, far. I know. It's crazy to think that, like, how many images there are of this lion with Una that he's only around for one.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And again, if we are taking that observation of the lion as Jesus, Lion of the tribe of Judah, we have lawlessness killing Christ.
Yeah.
Again.
Right. Yeah, which is kind of what I meant. That actually does kind of tie in well to the idea of like his crucifixion and stuff like that, right? Yeah. The lion just doesn't come back, right?
Right. So. At least, right. I mean, Aslan does, but that's a different story.
Not quite the same story. So. The thing I really like actually about this cantos, again, because this is only the first three cantos, is how much happens.
Right.
So it's a pretty good adventure. I actually, in some sense, it reminds me a lot of those like medieval romances where a lot does tend to happen actually pretty fast. I definitely recommend reading those things. Actually, that's one of the reasons I wanted to read the Faerie Queene, because I mean, if you're familiar with Shakespeare or the King James Version of the Bible, you're probably not going to have the toughest time reading the Faerie Queene. And I definitely recommend learning to read different forms of English personally, right? And the easiest way to do that is just pretty much to go most recent to back, right? So, I mean, like maybe read William Morris first, right? Because William Morris archaizes a lot, but he's writing at the end of the 19th century, which really isn't that long ago, right? Read Shakespeare, right? Read this guy, Spenser, right? And then maybe you can go to Chaucer, who's really not that difficult as far as Middle English is concerned. And then you can go to, to the more difficult things like Sir Gawain and the Green Knights, and then you can go to Old English. You'll figure out it's not actually all that hard if you speak English, especially natively. So
most of it is learning how to, besides the words that mean different things or the words that aren't in common use anymore, most of it is learning how to interpret the spellings into things that make sense, or use the words. A lot of times you'll see that words are used and their definition makes sense, but the common word that we would use would be a synonym to that. And so learning how to make those connections and work your way through to understanding, okay, what does this word mean that they're using, and does it work within the context? And then as you start doing that, I found this a lot with learning Spanish. As you start to learn these other words, you can make connections and see, I do see how that works. I do see how that, even with our modern definition of that word, I do see how that fits with this definition. And then it gives you a broader understanding of the English language the more that you look at those words and those connections.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are other things to help, right? I mean, if you're studying Middle English or early modern English, French, Latin in particular help a good amount. I'm sure Spanish is decently helpful. Old English, knowing German might help a decent amount. Or any Scandinavian language for that matter. So anyways, speaking of language stuff, I have some language notes again. Okay.
Do it.
I think the first one, and I think this is my first note for the whole canto, so it must have popped up really early on, is then. So the word THEN pops up here. Okay. But it actually means than, as in THAN. Okay. You have to note that they're actually the same word at this period. They are not two separate words. They were used for either thing, right? Then or than. which is just both then. Anyways, so they're interchangeable, right? It's not actually two words at the time. Interesting recent language change there. And then I don't think I have as much to say. Let me double check. Oh yeah, I had a couple lines I thought were just pretty nice because I already mentioned salvage, which is savage, right? Um, and savage actually, strictly speaking, salvage, right? What is it? You can tell actually with the L in there is that it means of the woods. It's literally what savage means, right? Because it's coming from the Latin silvaticus, right? Silva meaning woods, right? So, anyways, some lines I
Which
thought were
is where
nice.
we get the wood elves in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, the Sylvans.
Tolkien,
Yeah.
the Sylvan elves are wood
Yeah.
elves.
Yep. Or
Gotta
Pennsylvania.
gotta work Lord of the Rings in.
So, yeah. Hey, Transylvania. So, a dram of sweet is worth a pound of sorrow. I thought that was a sweet line.
Yeah.
Sweet line. Anyway. No,
Yes.
so,
I see what you did there.
yeah. And then the other one was true love hath no power to looking. We got to have our infinitive there. To looking back, his eyes be fixed before. Right. I would just say ahead.
Yeah.
So, and I like those. Those are sweet, right? Ones
Yeah.
that I put that on a T-shirt or something, or put on my wall. Live, laugh, love, right?
Yes.
So, um, that's it. I think as far as that canto. So we can go on to Canto 4, which I think
Yep.
if I remember correctly, let me double check actually because I might just be misremembering.
Mm-hmm.
Canto 4. I know in modern Roman numerals 4 is normally IV, and it is actually in this version. In older texts, it's actually almost always 4 eyes. So,
Interesting.
but that's how I wrote it in my notes. So, okay, this must be an opening thing again, so I'll read it. So it says, for unto night there is no great shame than lightness and inconstancy in love. Okay, so we're getting back to the Red Cross night here. And so the Red Cross and Duessa come to the House of Pride, okay, which is ruled by Lucifera. A very on the nose name
Who's
again.
that?
Right?
Who could that be?
Right. And what's noteworthy here is that she is a usurper. Okay, she is not the rightful queen. Right. But she lives in a grand castle that is built on a sandy foundation. Sounds familiar if you know your biblical parables. And also she has a dragon and she's got 6 wizards. And the 6 wizards actually are kind of riding beasts, and together they represent the wizards and the beasts represent the 6 deadly sins, right? Which is idleness, gluttony, lechery, avarice, envy, and wrath. The house Lucifer itself was pride, right? So the 7th brick. But so, anyways, parade of allegory stuff there.
Right. If my memory serves, there's not a ton that actually happens in this canto beyond descriptions of what's being seen, what's this parade, if you will, of the deadly sins. Essentially, there's a little bit more that happens than that, but that's a good portion of this canto, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of setup here, and I believe, oh gosh, as another one of the Saracen brothers, is it Sans? Is it the last one?
It's the last one. Yep.
Sans Joy, yeah, so joyless. Sans Loy, Sans Foy, Sans Joy. So, easy to get confused.
Yes. There is an order, an age order to them, and I don't remember what it is. I believe
I don't remember either. Yeah.
The first one, Sans Foy, for some reason that one I think is the middle child, and then Son. I don't remember, but there is an order to them that is you're told the order, the age is not ages, but the birth order of the brothers.
Yeah. I also realized that in French they would sound different. Saint Joie. Anyways, but we're not speaking French. So
we don't speak French.
Well, I'm unfortunately. No,
I don't.
No, so but yeah, it's a lot of it is dressing in a sense. I mean, there are some things that happen. So like, right, Satan actually rides in behind this menagerie, kind of, right? A member of the team he whips actually a sloth. So we have another sin there, right? The Red Cross actually, he kind of steps out of the House of Pride because it's a lot going on, and he meets Sanjoy there, right? When he steps out, and then they duel. until Lucifer tells him to stop because that's inappropriate for a party, right? Essentially. And then, but the Red Cross Knight actually throws his gauntlet right after Sanjoy slanders him. But I think it's back inside actually that Duessa pledges loyalty to Sanjoy. And yeah. Oh, and she tells Sanjoy of Holiness's enchanted armor, the Knight of the Red Cross's enchanted armor, right?
That's an important thing that we didn't mention from early on. In the setup in that front matter, whatever it's called in your book, it talks about why when Holiness is selected, that he has to come in the armor that he has because they don't have any armor for him. And the implication there is and it's stated directly that it's the armor of God that in Ephesians 6, that's the armor that they're talking about. And so when he comes back to this and they're talking about his enchanted armor, that's literally what they're talking about,
right?
Again,
but it pretty much helps. He's kind of invulnerable. It's also described that he is untested, right? He is young and young. He's stripling pretty much, right? I mean, as far as like knights go. I mean, obviously he's had some fights now in duels, right? But
a couple of them.
Yeah. So, but at the start of the story, that's the main plot points that I had. Yeah, I have a couple of language notes.
Yep.
But yeah, the biggest thing is the little duel coming to the House of Pride, which I will say the House of Pride, it's kind of a lot to read through, but it is going to be contrasted later on in book one, and I think contrast makes it work a lot better. So anyways, I think as far as like language notes are concerned, let's see. So yeah, there's some interesting diseases described, right? And so St. Francis's fire is actually I don't even know my modern disease, but the modern diseases actually have more confusing names. Erysipelas, right? I don't know. Like, interesting that St. Francis fire. He doesn't change that one too early, I guess, in the Reformation because St. Francis that's a Catholic saint. But anyways, we have the word meed that shows up, MEED, which means like reward or recompense in this case.
Yep.
And then we have a fator, which is mostly just spelled differently. I will say no one uses the word fator. But in modern English, it's FAITOUR, which means like an imposter or charlatan, cheat. You also have freaks here in this canto, which actually means kind of like behavior, luck, whims. Actually, this still applies in like a freak storm, right? Which is to say it's like random, right? Essentially fickle, right? It is, you're right. So also I wanted to note that the Red Cross Knight is described as elfin a lot. I think that might be the most common description for him is elfin, which is interesting. But
right. I mean, he does come from the court of the Faerie Queene,
right? So,
but
it does make sense there. So, anyways, if nothing else, we can go on to Canto 5.
Yeah.
Right. So remember in Canto 4, he threw down the gauntlet. There's going to be a duel, right. And so that's what actually starts Canto 5. It's Red Cross Knight and Sanjoy duel. The Red Cross Knight knocks down Sanjoy, right? But a dark cloud overshadows Sanjoy, and he disappears. But Holiness is declared the victor. He doesn't, kill the guy, right? He doesn't get justice in a sense, but he is declared victor, at least, which is something considering where he is. And then this one has another interesting scene actually, because what mostly happens after here is Duessa actually goes to the goddess Night and pleads with her to save Sanjoy, right? So Night has actually taken him to the underworld. And oh man, what's his name? Asclepius. Asclepius, yeah.
That's how it was pronounced in Pericles, at least.
I think that's right. Asclepius. So heals him, who's the god of medicine. Yeah. So then Duessa returns, okay, the Red Knight is gone. And the dwarf, actually, here, he's coming more as an important character at this moment. The dwarf had told him of the dungeons in the House of Pride, essentially. And so, fearing danger that maybe he'd get thrown in, the Red Knight cross leaves, essentially.
Yeah.
That's like my last plot point I have.
Yeah.
I have some other notes, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't remember exactly if it was in this canto or in another one, but at some point in the underworld, we just see a whole bunch of generic underworld scenes. Sisyphus and a whole bunch of other characters from Greek mythology, and their tasks that they're assigned because there are punishments, I guess, that they're assigned and stuff like that. So it's just a lot of very common imagery that we're used to, anybody who knows Greek mythology or medieval literature.
Yeah, again, it's really getting into the classic imagery. There's a lot of that. So I mean, honestly, familiarity with Roman and Greek's myth and history to a degree, constellations, and of course, like biblical knowledge. You need it all, actually. Sorry, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is why your channel is Lyceum and mine is Erudite. This is what we're this is what we're looking for. This is what we're trying to achieve through these channels is a greater understanding, essentially.
Yeah, and so that's one of my favorite things actually to learn. That's one of the reasons I'm more of a philologist than a linguist, is that philology is inherently focused on texts, right? So like I'm literally will tell you some of these words at the end of every canto section or whatever. I read those words in the text, right? I didn't have to recreate it. To me, I love linguistics, and there's some aspects of linguistics that are wonderful, right? And I use them as a philologist, but that they feel a little artificial in some sense. So anyways, the notes I had for this, unless you have more thoughts for Canto 5, is that we have early on in this canto, we have the word German show up. What does German mean to you? Do you know?
I don't remember. I did know at one point, and I don't remember now.
It means brother. It's hermano.
I did know that. I knew it and I forgot it. But
there is some really cool etymology potentially for this, actually, which is to say German not so much, actually. This isn't really, you don't really use it in modern English. Germain is related,
right? Yeah.
But a German brother in modern English means like a full-blooded brother. And the reason being is because brother actually does not imply blood relation at its etymological roots, right? And you can see this in, say, like the Greek word for brother, or the brother, I can't remember what it is exactly in ancient Greek, doesn't mean brother. It means like citizen, essentially, right? So I mean, like you see this pop up in most Indo-European languages, and interestingly enough, Spanish doesn't keep it. Actually, it goes with hermano instead, which is blood relation. So brother doesn't imply blood relation; it implies like a kind of relational relation. Interestingly, there's a whole lot to it, but we won't get into. So German just means brother, essentially. There's a word cative that shows up here, which normally in modern English is caitiff, caitiff, which is literally the word captive, mind, but it can mean like a wretch or a villain or a coward as well. Oh yeah, also we have a mention of crocodile tears, I think, somewhere in this canto. Which is still an idiom we use in modern English, right? But for those who are unaware, crocodile, there's a myth that crocodiles cry when they're eating their prey, right? But they're crying, but they'll still devour you, right? Type of thing. Which is not true, by the way. But that's the idea. Let's see. Oh yeah, we also have the word excheat, which is escheat. I'm not actually sure how you say it in English. It's ESCHEAT. Maybe it's escheat. I don't know. It looks French. Escheat. I don't know that. But which means like plunder or kind of reverted property. It's a legal term. It's like a reversion type of thing, right? There's actually some. So what I will say actually about this big description of stuff is that it kind of reminded me a little bit of Goethe's Faust at times. Um, anyways, leech means doctor. Okay,
Right.
that one's pretty straightforward, I think. Well, interestingly, in Old English, lacha is two different words, and etymologically are not the same. There is leeches and the word doctor leech are not actually etymologically the same, but they seem to be folk etymologized really early on that people connect them because, of course, leeches use leeches. So, so, and we also have the word noyous, which means troublesome or harmful or injurious. It's actually related to the word annoy or noisome. And then we have like a, yeah, I don't know, man. We have this huge listing of classical things, like you mentioned. It's actually probably my least favorite part of the poem so far. But um, and also I think the dwarf with actual character work, we actually get to see kind of what he is supposed to be a little bit here, and we actually see that he's kind of slow to act in a lot of ways, but he's steady in a sense, right? He actually is. I think most people will say that he represents common sense or he represents reason. So, but that is also to say that he is then a reminder that human power only goes so far, especially in the story with all these supernatural, um, figures essentially. So that's Canto 5. Canto 6. Okay, so we go back to Una. I'm talking way too much to you. I apologize.
No, you're
but
okay.
Una,
I mean, if you weren't talking, nobody would be. So
just 2 hours of silence. No,
yes. No,
anyways,
we're okay.
Una is captive of Sans Loy. He tries to seduce her. This doesn't work. She ends up actually. So satyrs and fauns kind of hear her cries and seeing her pity her. She is then brought to Sylvanus, who he actually kind of compares her to Venus or Diana. I didn't mark down which stanzas they were, but they're pretty cool stanzas. And they kind of actually they worship her, right? Against her wishes, if I remember correctly. But then we learn of a famous satyr warrior who is Saturain or something like that. Saturain, I don't know. And do you remember how it's said in the audio?
No.
Okay.
Saturain sounds better.
Yeah. I mean, it's Saturain.
Right. So, I mean, satyr makes sense, but
yeah. Well, Saturain does sound better. But he befriends.
They change pronunciation of things all the time.
I mean, I don't know what Spenser intended because I don't know this character at all. But he befriends Una, and he decides to help her in seeking the Red Cross Knight. Actually, right? They go on their way. They meet a pilgrim, in parentheses here, a pilgrim, right? Who says the Red Cross Knight is dead, slain by a Saracen. Right? This pilgrim, of course, is Archimago, who's popping back up as Deceit. The Saracen is Sans Loy, but doesn't matter. Sans Loy. Let's see. I can't remember. He my notes. I can't read my handwriting. Sans Loy. What did I say?
I think he fights. I think he fights
Saturain, right? But there's something about it, like maybe he doesn't want to. I can't remember exactly.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to either if I was fighting a half human, half satyr knight creature thing. Yeah.
I can't remember. Exactly.
I do remember something about that, and I don't remember what it is. I remember hearing it now, one of the 3 times that I listened through.
Yeah, I can't read my handwriting. I don't know what the heck that is. Anyway, so but Una though flees, and Archimago goes after her. That's how this canto ends.
Yeah. So let's see. Am I correct, or am I getting confused again? Because story time. During Pericles, which for those of you who are watching this that don't know, I was just in a Shakespeare play called Pericles, Prince of Tyre, And so whenever I reference Pericles, that's why, is because it's fresh in my mind. Anyways, one of the times we were talking about, they mention no Pan. They mentioned the god Pan at one point, I believe. Either that, or we just were mentioning it at one of the scenes. Anyways, whatever the case, at one point I was discussing with some of the other cast members something about regarding Pan, the god, who is the satyr god, or faun, or whatever you want to call him, and we could not remember his Roman name. Is Sylvanus his Roman name? That's what's sticking in my mind now that I'm going back through it. I'd have to double check that. But
That
whatever
would
the
make
case,
sense. I can't remember.
whatever the case, this is a Roman, like this is a deity basically, that they're another Roman deity, Greek god type character that they're coming across. I mean, we were just in hell, seeing all these Greek myths. So like this is very, very common. So I'm going to look it up real quick because I don't want to be wrong about that.
That's fine. T is never wrong.
I guess no. He usually goes by Faunus, which is what I was thinking, but it doesn't make sense. So who is Sylvanus then?
Sylvanus maybe just might be a Roman.
It may just be
guy.
Okay, just the ancient god of the woods. Okay,
just fair because his name means woods.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so that's why I was getting confused.
I think they are associated.
They're associated,
yeah,
but they are not the same character. Okay, I feel better about myself now because I was like, it sounds right, but it doesn't. And okay, either way, he's still a Roman god, Roman deity. So,
yeah.
Yep. The point still stands.
Yeah, he's a Dungeons and Dragons deity too, at least in Forgotten Realms. So the only language note I had in this one actually is that cruel. It's pretty close to the modern usage of cruel, but it can mean a couple things actually. So it's like dangerous or harmful, but it can also mean bold or valiant. So if you see it being used to describe a good guy, then it probably means bold or valiant. So, yeah. Anyways, shall we go on to Canto 7?
Sure.
We are now halfway through, everybody.
But that one didn't take us very long to go through. So.
No, that's
right. It would have taken us less time if I'd remembered my Roman god facts correctly.
Yeah, darn, dang it. No, so
and you said that I'm never wrong, which is wrong. Anyways, continue.
Okay. I can't remember. My note here actually says this is from earlier, so maybe it's not from Canto 7, but I have a note here that says, "So the one for wrong, the other strives for right." That probably is from some duel. Earlier, maybe it was Saturnine duel.
Probably. Yeah, that would make sense.
Anyway, so as far as plot here, we have Duessa going back to the Red Cross Knight, right? So Duessa finds Red Cross Knight without his armor. And they kind of relax actually, and he drinks from a magical stream that weakens him. And this is where we have some more interesting things. So we have a giant actually that he approaches, and the Red Knight cannot defend himself. This knight is Orgoglio. Not so the giant is Orgoglio. So Duessa actually kind of bids the giant not slay the Red Cross Knight, but to take him as a slave. Right.
Yep.
She's nice like that.
And is she pledges fealty to him, if I remember.
Yeah, correctly. They actually become lovers.
If he but the excuse is if you don't kill him, if you take him alive, I'll pledge fealty to you and do whatever you want. Okay. Yeah.
There's not much else that happens, right? So become lovers. And the dwarf actually, he gets like a more important part, and he takes the armor. He actually flees with the armor, and he finds Una. So we're getting a kind of a close to a reunification. And Una here meets a special person.
Yes,
our favorite person, and
at least a character in one of our favorite mythologies,
It's my favorite.
and a very important character.
Yeah, it's Prince Arthur. She meets Prince Arthur.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think we get more about him in the next canto, but
Yes, we
pretty
do.
much they just meet in this one. So, um, yeah, that's it. There's not much more to that one actually. That's a pretty straightforward canto
Yep.
as well. I do have a couple
Yeah.
language notes, but not a lot. So,
I before you do that, in case maybe I catch this and you don't, or maybe it's not even a real thing. Orgoglio, the name of the giant, as we've seen, giant or names usually mean something. Am I off base with this in that it's essentially pride again? In
yeah,
Spanish, and
I think
I'll say
so.
this is the reason why. In Spanish, the word orgullo means pride,
Oh,
and
okay.
it could be a different synonym to pride, not specifically pride. But what did you
Yeah.
what is your understanding of orgoglio mean?
Um, I think I think it's pride. I think it. I mean,
That's
I
just
think it's
the
Italian.
first thing that
Clearly, like
came to my
Italian
mind.
for pride. So
Hearing it is that was the association that I made. Whether or not it's accurate, I'll
yeah,
leave
I
that
mean,
up
it
to
might
you.
be something close. I can't remember. I don't know if I wrote a note down actually for this. Maybe I did somewhere else, but that maybe it's more like arrogance or something. But it's essentially pride.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, he's giant. There's
Yeah.
yeah, that all these characters have very on the nose names, which is great. I like it. Um, so, um, I don't have. I should have wrote. I don't know why I didn't write down a name, a note for his name. But
That's right. Probably wasn't important. Probably doesn't mean anything.
oh, well, it definitely means something. So, um, and it's probably pride or something close enough, at least. So, um,
It's an Italian word that translates to pride in English. That's what the AI overview of Google
Okay.
says.
Um,
Wikipedia, however, says Orgoglio is a literary character in Edmund Spenser's famous epic Faerie Queene. Orgoglio means pride in Italian. So
okay,
we're right on base with it,
yep, there we
according
go.
to Google.
Pride bad. Yeah, I only had two language notes for this canto. One of them was tway, which means twain or two, same word. It's twain and two come up because there's like there's like three forms of two in Old English. But tway is actually just a shortened version of twain. Anyways, and then Hebben is ebony. So it is. I
Heaven.
think
Okay.
they're cognates. I think actually it's the same word, just different paths and where we get them from essentially. So that's it. That's my only language thoughts here.
Cool.
So I see, like, I don't think there's probably some like footnoted version that like puts or glossed maybe that like takes every rare word and just says what it is in modern English or something. Mine does not. So
neither does mine.
there's like an 1890s version of this book that has beautiful illustrations. I sent you every single one because there's one for each book or each canto. There's actually two in one canto, but there's 13 illustrations for book one. But they're absolutely wonderful. You can find them online in public domain. So, anyways, Canto 8. Let's open up the book again for this one. Actually,
yay!
Oh wait, I went back too far.
I should get myself a copy so that I can do some of this as well.
Yeah,
I'll do that. I'll do that for the next one.
It's probably pretty cheap in some places.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one, these kind of opening stanzas talk about failures in grace, if I remember correctly. I didn't mark how far to go. So let's just start reading. Let's see. I me, how many perils do enfold the righteous man to make him daily fall? Were not that heavenly grace doth him uphold, and steadfast truth acquit him him out of all. Her love is firm, her care continual. So oft as he through his own foolish pride or weakness is to sinful bands made thrall. Else should this Red Cross knight in bands have died, for whose deliverance she this prince doth thither guide. Let's see. Yeah, actually, that's the opening probably. Yeah, right. So, we are back. We have Una. We have Arthur. I think we have the squire as well of
Yeah.
Arthur, and then we have the dwarf. Right, they actually approach Orgoglio's castle. Um, there is a duel. I think if I remember correctly, actually Arthur is the one who fights Orgoglio. Um,
Hmm.
is that correct? I think
That's what I remember as well.
so. The giant dies an ignominious death. Now, he dies from the light of Arthur's shield. Actually, they have this pretty intense duel, and then he's summarily dismembered after his death, and then he deflates, which is interesting, right? So he once he loses his head, he just deflates and nothing practically. Um, so,
Some
uh,
prideful imagery there.
yeah,
Things that happen regarding
he's
pride in
empty.
that imagery. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's also a giant, which is something that needs to be conquered. So, anyways,
yeah, giants always are very fun
yeah,
in like medieval things. I know this isn't medieval, but it's close enough. So
yeah.
um, there's a servant in the castle named Ignaro, which is this ignorant, right? And
Hmm.
he's ignorant of holinesses or the Red Cross Knights whereabouts, right?
Yeah.
Um, he's not actually called Holiness all that often, if I remember correctly. He is called it decently often, but like I mostly, if I call him Holiness, it's because in my notes are Holiness because I didn't want to write
Yeah.
out the Red Cross Knight. So
TRC, yeah.
yeah,
Or TRK, I guess.
but yeah, um,
We'll just call him Truck from now on. Or
goodness
TRK
gracious, I
Truck.
can't read. Yeah, yeah, we'll call him Trip. I can't read my handwriting again. Oh my gosh, what does this say? What? What does that say? I'm sorry, guys. I can't read my handwriting. It's something about blood. The blood of something.
I don't. I'm not immediately off the. You can keep trying to interpret, and I'll talk for a few minutes about some of the
Oh,
things that are going on
innocence.
here.
There's blood of innocence
Innocence.
at the altar. That's what it is.
Gotcha.
My handwriting's
That makes
terrible.
sense. That makes sense. So in this, I believe it's in this chapter or this canto, we have after the defeat of Orgoglio, we have Duessa riding out on a beast, and the imagery here is the uh, what's it called? It's the same imagery as is in Revelation, talking about Babylon, the great whore, and all that section where she's coming out on a beast. That's the imagery that we're getting in this chapter, if I remember if I'm remembering correctly. That it's this chapter. I know it happens somewhere, but I believe it's this chapter or
Yeah, I
this
think you're
canto.
right. I didn't put a note for it, but she does come out and Duess is actually this is also where you get the gross description of her, I think, after she's kind of revealed and unmasked.
Maybe so.
Um, so because Una pleads actually with the Red Cross Knight not to kill Duessa. Um, yeah, so she's revealed to be bald and hideous and monstrous. She's got a tail, I think. I remember sending you a note about this when I read this for the first time. I was like, oh, interesting. Which I, yeah. Anyways, so
Because
she's revealed to be monstrous,
the
gross.
description that I keep referring to, and I can't remember where it's at, is something about how basically uh from the top half of her is hideous, and then whoever was describing her couldn't see the bottom half of her, but he could only imagine that it was even worse, basically, um because of it's like she's covered in water or something like that.
Yeah, she's like
And I don't
really
remember,
disgusting,
but
I guess.
it's a disturbing and disgusting description of whatever is being described, and you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
this is nasty. um yeah, it I mean, it's because I remember thinking about um Ursula from the Little Mermaid, and in King Arthur Legend of the Sword, when they go down into the crypt and sacrifice uh Katie McGrath to the beasts down there. That's like, those are the same images that I was conjuring up in my mind while that description was being
Well, let's. I
written.
found it. I found the
So
description. Let's read it.
you found it? Okay. Do
Yeah,
it.
this is stanza 46. So she bade the which they disarrayed, enrobed of royal robes and purple pall, and ornaments that richly were displayed, right? Because she's dressed all ornately before, right? As Fidessa. but ne spared they to strip her naked all. Then when they had despoiled her tire and caul, such as she was, their eyes might her behold, that her misshaped parts did them appall. A loathly, wrinkled hag, ill-favoured, old, whose secret filth good manners biddeth not to be told. Her crafty head was altogether bald, and as in hate of honourable eld, was overgrown with scurf and filthy scald. Her teeth out of her rotten gums were felled, which I guess they'd fallen out, and her sorrow breath abominably smelled. Her dried dugs, like bladders lacking wind, hung down, and filthy matter from them welled. That's gross. Anyways, her grizzled skin as rough as maple rind, so scabby was that I would have loathed all womankind. Her nether parts, the shame of all her kind, my chaster muse her shame doth blush to write, but at her rump she growing had behind a fox's tail, with dung all foully dight. Oh my gosh. And eke her feet most monstrous were in sight. For one of them was like an eagle's claw with gripping talons, armed to greedy fight. The other like a bear's uneven paw, more ugly shape yet never living creature saw. Yeah, which when the knights beheld, amazed they were, and wondered at so foul deformed wight. Such then said Una as she seemeth here, such is the face of falsehood, such the sight of foul Duessa, when her borrowed light is laid away, in counterfeitance known. Thus when they had the witch disrobed quite, and all her filthy features open shown, they let her go at will and wander ways unknown. That's disgusting reading,
Yeah.
to be honest. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
funny, but like,
Right.
it's like, wow,
Yeah.
he's like, how can I make this as gross as possible? Like, pretty much.
Yeah, we're gonna make her all scabby and give her a foxtail.
Yeah, man. Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
Oof. I don't think I have. No, I do have one language note for this canto, I think.
All right.
Yeah, just one. Okay. It is
Certainly a hideous imagery.
Yeah. So my note was actually from the beginning of the canto, but it's brast, which means it's actually the simple passive burst with the metastasis.
I like it.
Actually, I think that's closer to the original. The R's were normally there originally. So yeah. So this would be just burst, I guess, or bursted, maybe, if you wanted to say that one in modern English. So okay. Anyways, Canto 9. Shall we go on? Okay. So we actually get Arthur, who recounts his lineage, right? He doesn't know his parents, of course, and so he recounts his reason to be in Faerie as well. Right. Essentially, there's a maid that called herself the Queen of Fairies, and he's been searching for 9 months, essentially. And this is where Arthur exits, I think, actually. So Una and the Red Cross, they kind of like farewell Arthur, and then they now continue to Una's home, right? Essentially, the whole goal of this whole book, right? To save her parents from the dragon, because they're now reunited, right? But Una fears that Holiness is too weak from his captivity, essentially. And there's actually a description of him before Duessa is described in the previous canto that kind of describes his weakened state. But then we have Sir Trevisan, who appears, right, fleeing from despair, capital D, despair, who already caused Terwin to kill himself. Right. So the Red Cross Knight is eager to challenge despair. But what does this say? Does it say woman? The woman is calm and says that sooner dead. Yeah, sooner dead means less. Sib? That looks like Sib. My goodness, what does that mean? Peace? Anyway, but less sin. That's right. Okay, the despair. No, is it a woman? I can't remember. So someone says the sooner you die, the less you sin, essentially, right? So that to commit suicide is the here, right? The Red Cross is persuaded, right, essentially to suicide, right, for his sins, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't actually commit it, of course, but so Una actually stops him, right, and pulls him from the cave of despair. And I think the big key here, actually, right, is that God's truth of mercy is greater than despair. That you don't have to give in to despair. So,
good.
Is that Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
seems reasonable.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we don't
guess
have
now
very many left, but
I guess now's a good time to point out that the reason why I keep looking down is I found and I've mentioned this, but I found like a brief overview of each of the cantos, and so that's what I'm referencing as you're going through this to spur on my own memory, but also see how well you're aligning with it, and see how well this thing is interpreting the book. And so far,
yes,
it's lining up pretty well. So
next time I hope my handwriting's a little better.
next time I will try and have a little bit more to contribute as well.
Well, that's you're contributing good. All right.
Debatable.
Debatable. Okay. I have a couple of notes on language. I think a couple. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a part early on in the canto where the word thews is used, which in most modern English that it's not common in modern English anyways, but it means like muscles, essentially like strength, kind of.
Mm.
Thews actually in like its old English sense, and so it's more archaic sense, means customs, or something more like that, right? Habits, whatever, stuff like that. It can mean like virtues too, I think. But we also have the word brent, which again is just metathesis. It's burnt.
Yeah.
So, and also the word beret. Beret is pretty uncommon in English. In fact, it's used a decent amount in the King James version of the Bible, but most King James versions of the Bible actually are not the exact same as the facsimile, and they will change beret to betray because it has a similar meaning to betray, but it is not actually quite the same. Beret means more to reveal, right, or disclose, expose, or divulge, right? So if you use beret to divulge things, then yes, you are betraying, right?
And
So,
that's BEWRAY,
yeah,
something like that. Okay.
beret.
Yeah.
BEWRAY. That's right. Yes. All right. Should we go on to Canto 9 or 10? Sorry.
10. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is where we get the echo of the House of Pride, which I think was one of the best parts of the story, personally. Here, right. So Una decides to take this despairing Knight of the Red Cross, who's also weakened still, to the House of Holiness. Okay, which is his house. It's essentially like a temple, as it is, right? Right. Let's see. I think I wanted to read a couple, or maybe one stanza from here. Yeah, stanza 3 of Canto 10. There was an ancient house not far away, renowned throughout the world for sacred lore, and pure unspotted life. So well, they say, it governed was and guided evermore, through wisdom of a matron grave and hoar, whose only joy was to relieve the needs of wretched souls and help the helpless poor. All night she spent in bidding of her beads, and all the day in doing good in goodly deeds or godly deeds. It's interesting that we have a reversal here of the one woman that was blind earlier, right? This woman
Yeah.
also prays her beads, but she does something about it, right? She's not impotent in her actions, which is that she actually acts. So we have this dame actually, and her name is Dame Kyla, I think. I don't know how they said it in the audio. It just means heaven, sky, or whatever in Latin.
Yeah.
She has 3 daughters who are Faith, Hope, and Charity. Well, I translated them. That's not what exactly
Right.
But I so like for
Close
example,
enough.
Fidelia, right,
Mhm.
who instructs holiness in the gospel and discipline, right? So it's essentially the healing of holiness is actually his bringing back. You could say it's his Protestant Reformation, but so he's instructed first by Fidelia in the gospel and in discipline. Speranza then comforts him. I imagine comfort here, in a sense, means both strengthen and console, as we kind of use it nowadays.
Yeah.
And patience then and penance make him suffer actually for his crimes. So, which is fair because he's kind of messed up at this point, right? And he's not quite prepared to face the dragon, right?
Yeah.
But then Carissa instructs him in love and righteousness. And they take him actually to a hospital, right, where the 7 virtues heal him, I think. And recovered, then he is taken to a high hill by contemplation, and he sees the New Jerusalem, and he sees Cleopolis, which is the city of Faerie, right? It's Gloriana city. Cleopolis means glory city, literally. So he learns of his history and he learns of his future, right? So he's not just the Red Cross Knight anymore, right? He is not actually of Faerie, but he is born of a mortal king. I will also say that I wanted to read this, and I need to pull it up, but him going to the hospital to be healed by 7 virtues as a scriptural reference from Matthew. So it's Matthew 25, 35 through 36, just 2 verses. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me, and I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. So essentially, that is what is being kind of recapitulated there. I assume that he assumed everyone who read this recognized the scriptural reference. So he learns he is not a fairy, though. He's from mortal king, and he is destined to be Saint George of Merry England, which is just funny because Saint George is not English. I know he's the patron saint of England, and he has been for a while. At the point Spenser wrote this, right? But he's Saint George of Lydda, I think, is his name, right? He's Greek. But he essentially replaces the older patron saints of England. So,
and he's renowned renowned, I guess, for slaying a dragon.
He's
known as George the Dragon Slayer.
Yep.
So
that's him. So it's not surprising. Again, the Red Cross Knight, that is the flag of England has St. George's cross on it, and it's a red cross, right? So you have this England remembers itself in a sense because George remembers itself, which is to say it eschews Catholicism. And he's essentially restored, right? And now he is eager, he and Una then make for her castle to slay this dragon. That's essentially how this canto ends.
So the last time that we've really seen George, Holiness, Red Cross Knight, Trug, is when he drank this stream and was weakened. And so now we're seeing from that weakened, poisoned, destroyed state where he possibly sinned. That's I don't think it's clearly stated, and I think the implication is that he didn't, but it's definitely a time of temptation and a time of failure for him at the very least. And the fact that he is met without his armor on, that again referencing the fact that that's the armor of God, that we may stand against the wiles of the devil. Him not having that armor on is a failing. That is a bad situation to be in.
Yeah,
Duessa comes to him at that
is very common for knight stories too.
Yes, and so that is now we're coming to this house of holiness where we're reaffirming those virtues, where we're becoming those things that we set aside, where we're taking them back upon us, and so that we can go out and do what we were called to do, sent forth to do.
Yeah, I really enjoy this one, especially it's a really nice step back before we get to the finale, essentially, right? And it's I think it does a really good job of doing what it's supposed to do, right? It contrasts is really great with the House of Pride, much more enjoyable to read, and it is it prepares the hero in a sense to complete his quest, right? It is it re-enchants the hero almost, right? It's kind of like not just it's not quite even just an echo of the House of Pride, but it kind of in Canto 1 we have all this stuff being introduced and the failings of holiness in a sense from there. that it's kind of rectified in a sense, so he can go and finish this quest. So,
and it's again him and Una who were who
mhm.
originally set out together. So yeah,
Right. Yep. Um, if it wasn't obvious, yeah, there's other virtues besides his three daughters in the house. I
right.
mentioned a ton of virtues besides three. So, I do have some language notes real quick. I think
Yeah.
just a couple. Um, so we have that a Franklin is mentioned here. Franklin just means freeholder. Um, you also have Preef, which means proof. Okay, that's it. And that one's pretty straightforward. And let's see, yeah, that's pretty much it. I do think it's funny that again, it's not surprising that he is given this English identity. In fact, when you think of Saint George, often he's associated with England, even though he's not from England. Um, and in fact, I think but it's just funny because he is described literally as English, like he's described as a Saxon, right? In the story, in a sense, he is right because I mean, like they've just reconfigured him. This happens with these mythical figures, right? Arthur, who is almost certainly a Briton, is whoever the author wants Arthur to be, essentially, whatever the author agrees with. The author agrees with Arthur is anyway. So,
Yes.
but so yeah, it's interesting, but it's fine, right? This is an English writer; it's not that surprising. So I just think everyone should have that in mind that this is an English writer. It's obviously English, whatever. So, okay, should we go on to Canto 11, the penultimate?
Yes.
The book one. We're getting there, T.
Yeah, we're doing good. You're doing good.
Thanks. Yeah. Whew. I hope people are getting some stuff from this because I know in a lot of it it's just reciting plot points almost.
Right.
But I don't know, like I think learning that, especially with since it's allegory, this is very entertaining. I found it to be very entertaining.
It's
I
very fun to listen to. It's very
yeah.
if you can pay close enough attention to actually understand what's going on and follow the story, it's very fun to listen to. It's a very good story in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very it captured my attention. It is quite beautiful at times.
Yes.
I mean, I can't say that I loved every line and every stanza, right? But I mean, most
And
poems
he
just
even acknowledges that several times throughout, where he's like, I'm not the best poet. My words cannot sufficiently describe what I'm saying. And it's stuff like that. And it's so
this is
he
one of the longest
acknowledges
poems
it.
in English. This is huge.
Nonetheless, as a whole, it's largely great poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
I say as somebody who has not read that much poetry in the grand scheme of things.
I will say it's great. Maybe it's not as like gut punchy as some of the romantics or something like that, but it's stinking good. But I mean, it's told in the story of a romance.
Yes.
Which is to say, it's a narrative, right? Romances, if you read like Middle English romances, they're written in verse. Old French romance is written in verse, right? I mean, so which is quite the feat. You don't see very often. Malcolm Guite did recently publish Galahad and the Grail.
Galahad and the Grail, yep.
Which is a great modern verse epic. So I'm rereading it right now to my children. Thank you, T. Anyways, so I'll go through the plot points real quick of Canto 11. So Una and the Red Cross Knight, now we know as George, approach Una's home and hear the dragon roar, right? The dragon flies to meet the knight while Una kind of waits from a distance. Right? We don't want to get her hurt. So the knight's spear actually cannot pierce the scales of the dragon. And the horse and the knight and the horse fall to the ground. The fight actually continues on for 2 days, essentially. We get into a third day, right? But the knight is healed actually from burns in the well of life, which is definitely an equivalent to baptism. Una thinks him dead at this point, mind, because she's just watching from a distance. A magical tree heals him next, right, which is an emblem of the Eucharist, Christ's body and blood, right? And then we have the death of the dragon, which I'm going to read. So if you go to Canto or stanzas 52, I think. Yeah, 52 and 55. 53 is maybe the most central one, but so it's this whole page here. Anyway, so then freshly up arose the doughty knight, all healed of his hurts and wounds wide, and did himself to battle ready dight. whose early foe awaiting him beside, to have devoured so soon as day he spied, when now he saw himself so freshly rear, as of late fight and not him damnified, wax. I don't know. It's confusing me. Sorry. He waxed dismayed, or woke. I don't know, and gained to his fate to fear. Natheless, rather, with wonted rage, he him advanced near, and in his first encounter, gaping wide, he thought at once him to have swallowed quite, and rushed upon him with outrageous pride, who him recountering fierce as haddock in flight, perforce rebutted back the weapon bright, taking advantage of his open jaw, ran through his mouth with so importune might that deep impursed his darksome hollow maw, and back retired, his life blood forth with all did draw. So down he fell, and forth his life did breathe, that vanished into smoke and clouds swift. So down he fell, that the earth him underneath did groan as feeble so great load to lift. And down he fell as a huge rocky cliff, whose false foundational waves have washed away. With dreadful poise is from the Maniland rift, and rolling down great Neptune doth dismay. So down he fell, and like a heaped mountain lay. So the knight himself even trembled as it fell, at his fall rather. So huge and horrible a mass it seemed. And his dear lady, that beheld it all, durst not approach for dread, which she misdeemed. But yet at last, when as the direful fiend, she saw no stir, or saw not stir, off shaking vain affright, she nigher drew, and saw that joyous end. Then God she praised, and thanked her faithful knight, that had achieved, spelled funny, so great a conquest by his might. I will also just say I didn't notice this in originally, but it says nigher, literally nearer. I made a short on this one actually. The words, the positive is nigh. Sorry, I'm completely ruining this at the moment. Anyways, but the positive is nigh. Okay, the comparative is near, and the superlative is next. Okay, originally. In modern English, we use near, near, and nearest. Okay, I just think it's funny. That's like a false comparative, nigher, right? You literally just say near, and so that's like an interesting like false comparative that didn't stick, right? That's like if he if instead of using near, which originally was a comparative, as which we now use as a positive, that we actually retained nigh as the positive, and so it'd be like nigher and nighest or something like that as the comparative and superlative. Anyways, not important. He slays the dragon, so
yes.
I actually will say that I didn't quite there because I was focused on reading out loud. But actually, when I read this originally, I actually almost cried reading the ending just because it was like so cool and beautiful in a sense. So, but yeah.
Again, it's a very good sequence and very well written and very well portrayed. Spenser does an excellent job at portraying battle through poetry, and doing it in a way where again you can visualize what's going on, and he does it throughout this entire canto. It's basically broken up into thirds, with the first section of the battle, he dies, is resurrected by the well. He fights again, dies, is resurrected by the tree of life. He dies, and then this third time he kills the dragon. And so it's kind of split up into thirds in that section. I hope we don't care that I just outright said what those things are. It's basically it's almost like a fountain of youth is almost how that well is portrayed. And then of course the tree of life. And in fact, at one point, if I remember correctly, it specifically uses the phrase, it's like describing the ichor from the fruit that heals Bertolac, not Bertolac.
I mean,
George.
It's definitely like a body of Christ imagery.
Right. Which that's the thing. Ichor is the blood of the gods in Greek and Roman mythology. It's also sometimes used as the drink that they drink. Some weird stuff going on there. It's Greek mythology. You just kind of roll with it. But it's again showing that blood imagery, that holy godly blood imagery.
Yeah, Yeah, there's a lot of Christian imagery here. In fact, that's the point kind of the allegory, right? I mean, without that Christian imagery, the story is like, I guess it's still cool. He's slaying the dragon, but the whole point of it actually is this finale in a sense, right? That the the point of the end is victory, right, or triumph, even, right? And there's a lot of victories. It's the night over the dragon, but it's also the victory of Christ, okay, in a sense, right? It's especially with all that Christ imagery that recapitulating this idea that Christ conquered death. He's the victor, right? In a sense, like that death and sin lose in the end, in a sense, right? But also, I mean, like I think you can get bit. You can also say that it's victory for a lot of things, right? It's the victory of individual over sin, right? It's the victory of Protestantism over Catholicism, right? In
Right.
Spenser's case, and it obviously is also very particular that this is not by chance. This is by providence.
And I mean, I think we would be remiss in not mentioning the fact that biblical imagery of a dragon is Satan. It's
Yeah,
that's satanic imagery. So to not mention that in this discussion would be remiss. But again, that's kind of the obvious. That's like the low hanging fruit type of thing to mention. And so yes, it's there and it should be mentioned, but it's not.
gotta slay the dragon.
Yeah. So just things. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else that about this section. I mean, well, there is the fact that Una is standing off in the distance, believing that George dies twice, because that's what she sees. The dragon also believes that George dies. It's implied that the first resurrection, the dragon does not know what happens. If it's a new night, if it's the same thing, he doesn't know what's happening. The second one, it implies that he understands what's happening a little bit better. I refer to the dragon as a he. I don't know that it's referred to as a he in the story, but
I do think it's interesting because I feel like in some stories, well, you could definitely have action. You don't have such failures in a sense. Or that, I mean, that's getting back to the providence aspect. That like George only succeeds because God literally is resurrecting him. Essentially, like he only succeeds. Otherwise, he would have been toast several times, right? And so which is very interesting, right? Like I think of it like with like the slaying of Fafnir, which the dragon dies. That's cool, whatever. And then or Beowulf killing the dragon, and Beowulf dies actually killing the dragon. Now he does kill the dragon technically, right? But there's not like, oh, Beowulf made a mistake. Oh, God resurrected Beowulf. Oh, no, he died again. So it is definitely its own thing going on.
Yeah.
It's crazy that pretty much the whole canto is just the duel with the dragon.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big fight, and it's not a short canto either. It's not one of the shorter ones in the book. So,
yep,
yeah,
it's pretty good. And that is the climax in a sense, and then we get to Canto 12.
Yeah. Have any language notes about 11?
I don't actually. I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Canto 12 is kind of the untying of the knot in a sense.
Yeah.
Though it's not quite an ending, which makes sense because it is just book 1 of 6 of 12, I guess. So the king and queen see the dragon defeated, right? And they thank the Red Cross Knight. The kingdom then celebrates with music, feasting, gifts, even for the night. He announces, though, that he must serve Gloriana for 6 years and not marry Una during that time, which is kind of sad. And so there's like one last attempt of like this deception at this point, but it doesn't work at all, like where the knight is now. Right? So a messenger says that he that even he can't marry Una after 6 years, right? Because he's pledged to another Fidessa, right? But this messenger is actually Archimago. And then the celebration continues, but it kind of ends on a sad note as the Red Cross Knight then must go do his duty and fulfill his destiny by serving Gloriana. Right?
Yeah.
I guess someday George will get married to Una.
Yeah, at some point. I mean, theoretically, by the end of the story, we would see that happen. Unfortunately, the story does not get to the end.
There is no end. So tragic.
So it goes. So we do have a kind of, I enjoy this because I like big dragons. I think that's fun. We have the whole kingdom coming out and measuring the dragon, trying to figure out how many acres, I think is what it says, the dragon takes up, which means it's a massive dragon, and I love that.
Very cool.
I really like big dragons, so that was fun to see.
Yeah, they're often
Um,
actually decently small in a lot of medieval stuff,
yeah.
if you get a sense of their
Well,
size much. But
if you see the images, the paintings or drawings or depictions of George
George and the
killing
Dragon,
dragon,
yeah, he's like
it's
killing
a
a big
small
lizard.
dragon. It's a, yeah. I mean, it's a dinosaur dragon. I
Yeah,
it's still a dragon, but it's not a giant acre spanning dragon, which that's okay.
darn.
Yeah. What are the other things? There was a couple other things about this section, and maybe you want to mention them as well. One of them is the fact that this kingdom that they're in is Eden. That's the name of this kingdom. So they're, which you can kind of already guess, seeing as they, in the previous canto, he was revived by the tree of life, which is in the Garden
Yeah,
of Eden. So it's pretty obvious, but it's an interesting, it's kind of an interesting and obvious way to tell this Christian allegory.
hmm
But I mean, you're in fairyland, you go through hell, and you end up in Eden, paradise.
yeah.
Kind of makes sense. But this is
And it's
not the end
very
of his story. Again, he has to go back
yeah.
and serve another
I
six
mean,
years with the Faerie Queene.
I like it actually a lot. I didn't even put that down on my
Yeah,
notes or
I do
something,
too.
but it's a very physical reminder of kind of like uh, in a Christian context, right, of Christ's victory over death in a sense. Because
Right.
what does Christ do? Is he actually rectifies the mistakes of Adam and Eve, right? I mean, because what is Eden? Eden is essentially heaven, right? It's
Yeah.
quite, if you want, it's like Mount Olympus, right? It is described as high, right, and it's where heaven meets earth in a sense, right?
Mhm.
Um, Seemingly, God dwells in Eden in a sense, right? At least as far as the earth is concerned. Um, and so it's been the
I mean,
dragon is literally like the
the
serpent, essentially.
wording
Yeah,
is walks in the midst of the garden in the cool of
yeah,
the day or something like that.
mhm,
Um, so yeah,
right. Yeah, it's like this temple, mountainous, heavenly. You have to actually think about this in an etymological sense here. People know that
yeah,
heaven in English actually means stone, and it refers to like up there type of thing. The
yeah.
firmament literally means firm thing, right? It is the vault of heaven, which
Mhm.
literally means vault as in like a roof ceiling thing. Okay, it is literally made of stone, right? Mountains touch it in a sense, you know. Right? That's why like Moses goes onto the mountain to talk, right, to God in a sense. So um, it's to ascend, right? It's also why like temple um, uh, liturgical texts in like the Old Testament, it's always ascending. You go up essentially in
Yeah,
the temple and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
all heavenly stuff.
Again, lots of biblical imagery, lots of
Yeah.
biblical references and imagery. Like
Right.
it's not hard to catch at least one.
Yeah. Not hard. Not hard. I do think it was a little sad to me that like it's not quite a happy ending. Um,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, but I think that that is kind of. I mean, that obviously it's just book one, so in a sense that's
Hmm.
obviously the point. Sure, whatever. Um, but that it also is a reminder in a sense of that duty and destiny that
Yeah.
in real life that's not the end either, right? I mean, like if you want to speak like strictly like politically speaking, right, Elizabeth is actually still fighting the Protestants or sorry, the Roman church at this point, right?
Right.
She for the Protestants essentially. England is Protestant, but it's not guaranteed to stay so, right?
Yeah.
And even in this story, right, we have Duessa still at large, right?
Hmm.
Evil is not defeated in a sense, right? And won't be until the end of the world, right? Essentially, that's the reminder. So
Yeah. And yeah, not to push that aside or anything like that, not to diminish that in any way. I just also going back to just the story that's going on here. We have the messenger bring the message, where Duessa is trying to claim that no, he's actually betrothed to me.
yeah,
He can't marry this other gal, and they have to explain that. They have to. It's easy for them to explain, and them to be like, no, actually, this is the true matter. But they have to explain it. That it is something that has to be reconciled. Um, And then, as we've already mentioned, he has to go back and serve out his oath, the oath, the vow that he has made to the Faerie Queene to serve another 6 years yet.
Mm.
So it's in that way. Yes, it's not a happy ending in the sense that the knight gets the girl at the end, but it's still a good ending. It's
Yeah,
a good ending with
with
good themes
success.
and
Yeah,
yeah, success and honor, and just they're not, there's no negative attributes of it other than that they don't get their happy ending right now.
but it's implied that it would have happened if Spenser had
Yeah.
finished. So, rest in
Yes.
peace. So unless it happens in one of the other
I don't
books,
know.
so
We'll see.
probably.
We will find out, I
Um,
suppose.
so, anyways, I only had one language comment actually for the last canto, and that is gossip is used here in
Hmm.
the more original sense of the noun, which is to say that it means like friend or godparent, even more archaically. But good sib, right? So
Hmm.
sibling, a god sibling, essentially. Right? So, anyways, I don't really have much else to say. I enjoyed reading book one. We shall
Yeah.
have to read book two, and we will talk about it.
Yeah.
I assume in a similar format. Uh, and
I will try to be better about having notes and actually having the book. I'll make sure that I have at least the book. I can do that. I can do that part. Can't
yeah,
guarantee that I'll have notes or many more thoughts, but I'll get the book for sure.
right. And I
Um,
mean, I didn't announce this beforehand, so if anyone, feel free to read it with us.
yeah,
For sure. So,
yeah.
um, but yeah,
I have one other thing that the first time I read it, I caught this and I thought that's really interesting. That reminds me of this. And then I was like, I'm going to listen for that the next 2 times I go through it. Obviously, at the time, I didn't know I was going to go through it another 2 times. But the next 2 times I listened through it, I did not find it at all. So I have no idea where this was that I picked up on it. But there's a scene that in my books across the room, and I don't remember the name of the character, but there's a scene in this book that I read and listened to, and I thought this sounds a lot like, this reminds me a lot of the sequence in uh, Night by Jane Wolfe, where what's the fairy gal's name that Sir Abel's in love with the whole
um,
time? See, you can't remember it either. That's
well,
fine. Anyways, whatever her name is, um, there's this when they first meet and she first takes him to Fairyland, Alfrich or whatever you
yeah,
say that word,
yeah,
Alfricha, and they have their tryst or whatever, and go on that initiates the story. There's a scene in this book somewhere that reminded me of that the first time, and I can't find it again. All right, I didn't
yeah.
find it again the other 2 times going through it, but so as I was going through it that first time, I thought of the similarities to the Gareth story,
Hmm.
Beaumain's Gareth story, and then I thought of this. I caught the similarities with Wizard Knight, um, and so those were in my mind the whole time going through it. And then I picked up more things as I went and couldn't find that
Yeah.
Wizard Knight thing again. But
Nothing's immediately jumping to mind, but it is very late and I'm tired. But that is the Wizard Knight's a great two books, I guess.
yes, we also
So
did we discuss that one? I think we sat down and discussed that one. Maybe not.
I don't think we did. I think we kind of planned on it, sort of, but then like Britain didn't read it, and then I don't know. Just I don't remember what happened
Yeah,
exactly. But
we'll
I don't
throw
think
Britain
we
under the bus on this one.
did. So
We definitely. I mean, I made reviews for both books for Wizard
yeah,
Knight
yeah.
and for
I
Night
would
and Wizard,
reread that.
and you
Those
would.
are great books.
I would too. I actually at some point we
Yeah,
could
they're
do
kind of
that.
similar in a sense to this, but not.
Yeah.
I mean, Gene Wolfe has a very much an otherworldly sense,
Hmm.
which no other author really nails as well as he does. So, but anyways, thank you, T. I don't have any more
Yeah.
thoughts, but thanks. If anyone watched 2 hours and 19 minutes of this, then congratulations, um, or my condolences, whichever one you feel is more appropriate. But yeah, I enjoyed it. So I look forward
Yes.
to doing more of this and then future projects, of course, after.
Certainly.
So
Yes.
yeah. Anyways, this is Liam from Liam's Lexington, and tea from an erudite adventure. Catch you next time.